You're asking me to move because he doesn't want to sit next to me? The question wasn't loud, but it cut through the cabin with unnerving clarity. Passengers around seat 2A turned their heads, some with confusion, others with knowing silence. But let's rewind a bit. Before the cabin fell quiet, before the recording phones came out, and before the value of a man was weighed against the comfort of another. Kendrick adjusted the knot on his tie, the silk catching faintly in the overhead light. Black suit, white shirt, polished shoes. Everything sharp, everything intentional. Nothing flashy, just the uniform of a man who knew where he was supposed to be and what it had taken to get there. At 42 years old, Kendrick Monroe was the founder and CEO of Keystone Ventures, a rising investment fund that had quickly earned a reputation in aviation, logistics, infrastructure, and tech. Their typical deals ranged from $100 million to over $1 billion, and today's flight was the final step in closing one of their largest to date. He had boarded North Aero flight NA415 that morning from Atlanta, heading to Chicago to meet with the executive team of the same airline he was flying with. After 7 months of negotiation, Keystone was set to finalize a $500 million investment deal to modernize North Aero's outdated fleet and revamp its cargo logistics with data-driven technology. Upon arrival, he was scheduled to review final terms and authorize the first installment, $50 million, to be released that afternoon. Kendrick was a man who believed in showing up prepared, not just professionally but physically. No assistants, no flashy entourage, just him, his worn leather briefcase, and the presentation slides he had rewritten a dozen times. Seat 2A had been booked 3 weeks in advance intentionally. First class, window. Enough space and quiet to mentally walk through the pitch once more. Kendrick eased into his seat, removed his tablet, and began scanning through slides that projected fleet performance curves, return on equity timelines, and interactive logistics flow maps. Each slide represented not just strategy, but vision. And that vision was what had won over North Aero's skeptical board. Around him, first-class passengers filtered in. Across the aisle, a stocky white man in his early 50s plopped into seat 2C, talking loudly on his phone. He glanced at Kendrick once with a look that wasn't quite curiosity and wasn't quite acknowledgement either. Kendrick gave a polite nod, received none in return, and returned to his slides. Moments later, a flight attendant approached Kendrick's row. Young, blonde, blue uniformed, she asked to see his boarding pass. Kendrick handed it over without hesitation. She studied it longer than necessary, then asked for his name. Kendrick Monroe, he said with a quiet confidence. She nodded, returned the pass, and moved on. But the drink never came. While the man in 2C was offered sparkling water and pretzels before takeoff, Kendrick was left untouched. He noticed it, but said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence could be both shield and weapon. Kendrick's mind remained on the task ahead. His assistant had confirmed everything was on track. The CEO of North Aero would be at the meeting. A car was already en route to pick him up at the arrival gate. The numbers were aligned. The papers were ready. The vision was solid. Still, as he adjusted the brightness on his tablet, Kendrick couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't the temperature, or the noise, or the service. It was the air, the atmosphere. There was an unease moving through the first-class cabin like a whisper only he could hear. Years of experience had taught him to listen to that whisper. He didn't yet know that in the galley behind him, a quiet message was already being passed, one that had nothing to do with contracts or capital. Someone had decided that Kendrick Monroe, despite his suit, his slides, and his $500 million purpose, did not quite fit the image of seat 2A. And this flight, at 30,000 feet, was about to expose how high and how deeply bias could still reach. Kendrick had long mastered the art of navigating rooms where he was seen as an anomaly. This first-class cabin, with its quiet luxury and careful stairs, was no different. The service rituals unfolded all around him. Menus were handed out with practiced smiles, champagne glasses tinkled politely, and attendants offered warm towels with a near-theatrical grace. Yet somehow they all seemed to skip over seat 2A. It was subtle but deliberate. No menu, no towel, no greeting by name. A moment later, Brianna, the same young flight attendant from before, returned. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass again?" "We're just verifying some detail," she said with a tight smile. Kendrick blinked once, controlled his breath, and handed it over. Again. She glanced at it, nodded, and moved on with a dismissive, almost rushed, "Thank you." He watched as she served the man in 2C a second round of pre-departure snacks. A small voice in Kendrick's mind whispered, "Let it go. You're here to close the deal." But another voice, older, firmer, his mother's, rose in reply, "You belong in every room you walk into, even if they act like you don't." Growing up in East Baltimore, Kendrick had been taught early that life wouldn't always be fair, but you still had to show up ready. He remembered the worn linoleum floors of their apartment, the echo of his mother's heels heading out to her night shift job, the way she'd smile and say, "Every time they doubt you, you prove them wrong by being better than good." And Kendrick had done exactly that. He was valedictorian in high school, a top graduate from Columbia, and an MBA from Wharton. He had turned a modest logistics consulting company into Keystone Ventures, an investment force known for precise analysis and bold bets. The current deal with North Arrow wasn't just about fleet upgrades. It would give Kendrick strategic equity influence across several regional hubs, helping integrate advanced AI into airline logistics across the Midwest and Southeast. It was transformative, and it had been hard-earned. Across the aisle, the white man in 2C, Travis Brennan, chuckled as he scrolled through something on his phone. He looked up and tilted his head slightly. "You with the airline?" he asked, as if already assuming the answer would be no. "No," Kendrick replied smoothly. "I'm headed to a meeting with their executive team." Travis raised an eyebrow. "Ah, sales pitch? Software or catering?" "Investment," Kendrick said, still looking at his screen. "Oh," Travis said, sitting back like he had just been told a toddler was applying for CEO. "Didn't expect that." Kendrick gave a polite, closed-lip smile. He had no intention of explaining himself further. He didn't need to. A few rows ahead, a toddler began to cry. Brianna moved quickly to assist the child's mother, her professionalism clearly intact, just selectively applied. Kendrick took a long breath and turned back to his tablet. Every detail of the proposal was there. Financial forecasts, industry benchmarks, supply chain analytics. He didn't need champagne or a warm towel to close a deal, just a quiet cabin, and for once, the courtesy of not being interrupted. But as he adjusted the seat arm slightly, his phone buzzed. Amani, his assistant, had sent a message. "Exec team confirmed for 3 p.m. CEO sending car to meet you at Gate C." Kendrick tapped a quick "received" and locked his phone. Across the aisle, Travis watched him silently, then muttered under his breath, "Just loud enough. Some folks really know how to dress up ambition." Kendrick didn't flinch. He had heard versions of that line his entire life. He turned his focus back to the presentation slides. But what he couldn't see, what no passenger in seat 2A ever could, was the quiet exchange happening at the rear of the plane, a whisper from one uniform to another, a name, a row number, a signal. While Kendrick tried to stay focused in seat 2A, things were already moving in the background. In the forward galley, away from passengers' view, Carter Langford, North Arrow's chief experience officer, leaned toward Brianna with a look that brooked no debate. "Check seat 2A again," he murmured, his voice low but firm. "We have a last-minute platinum flyer boarding who needs that spot. Special medical accommodation." Brianna furrowed her brow. "The man's already seated. Confirmed ticket and all." "Tree," Langford's eyes narrowed. "Just do it. Ask politely if you must. But that seat is already reassigned. We'll issue a voucher. Make it clean." The explanation about a medical need was a cover. The truth had little to do with health and everything to do with perception. Kendrick Monroe, a tall, well-dressed black man, didn't fit Langford's mental image of a first-class investor, let alone someone poised to reshape the airline's future. The man was anonymous, not famous. He looked unfamiliar. That was enough for suspicion, enough to assume he didn't belong, but someone else did. Langford shot a quick message to Travis Brennan, who had just arrived at the gate. "All set. 2A will be clear by departure." Travis replied instantly, "You're the best. Drinks on me at the club tonight." Langford smirked. Travis had been a North Arrow Platinum member for 11 years, a constant presence at charity golf outings and shareholder mixers. He was exactly the kind of passenger Langford wanted sitting up front. A familiar face, a known entity, someone who'd never question why things worked in his favor. Langford didn't care that Travis wasn't booked in first class today. His loyalty and his influence spoke louder than booking codes. Back in the cabin, Brianna hesitated outside row 2, peeking over her tablet as Kendrick quietly adjusted the brightness on his screen. He looked completely composed, professional, unbothered. She took a breath and stepped forward. "Excuse me again, Mr. Monroe," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It seems there's a last-minute change. One of our VIP passengers has a special seating requirement, and we'll need to relocate you to a different seat." Kendrick raised an eyebrow calmly. "This seat was booked 3 weeks ago. Fully confirmed. I even reconfirmed it when boarding." "Yes, sir, and we appreciate that. But this guest has a condition that requires a specific seat configuration." He looked around the cabin. "There are other available seats in first class. That one right there, 3C, why not reassign him there?" Brianna hesitated. She hadn't expected pushback. "Let me check with my supervisor," she said quickly and walked away. Kendrick exhaled slowly, jaw tightening. Something felt off, not just the inconvenience, but the way it was being handled. Polite words layered over a distinct lack of courtesy. In the galley, Brianna found Langford again. "He's pushing back. Asked about 3C. Langford didn't flinch. "Then escalate. Supervisor will handle it." Back near the boarding door, Travis breezed onto the aircraft, nodding toward Langford with a smug smile. He barely glanced at Kendrick as he strolled into the first-class cabin, as if reclaiming a space that was rightfully his. His briefcase brushed a few armrests, but he didn't notice, or didn't care. Kendrick saw him now. A familiar face after all. Travis Brennan, North Arrow's longtime loyalist, featured in several promotional materials and glossy in-flight magazine pages. Kendrick had met him once at an investor roundtable in Chicago. Back then, Travis hadn't remembered his name, probably still didn't. Something was being arranged, that much was clear, but Kendrick had learned never to jump to conclusions. He would wait, watch, listen, and remember. Moments later, Kendrick looked up from his tablet as Brianna returned, this time accompanied by another crew member, a flight supervisor in a navy blazer with a laminated badge clipped to her belt. Her expression was tight and rehearsed, the kind that comes after a private conversation in the galley. "Mr. Monroe," she began, her tone gentle but firm, "there seems to be a seating issue that we need to resolve before takeoff. We're going to need your cooperation." Kendrick kept his voice measured. "I already confirmed my seat. I was checked in, scanned, and seated. What exactly is the issue?" The supervisor hesitated for a moment. "We have a priority passenger who has a medical accommodation. He specifically requires seat 2A for proximity to the aisle and access to additional space." Kendrick glanced around again. "There's no partition here, and there are open seats, 3C for example. Why not reassign him there?" Before the supervisor could respond, another voice cut in from behind. It was Travis Brennan, standing with arms crossed and an amused grin. "You really gonna make a scene over a seat, man?" he asked with mock concern. "Come on, some of us actually belong up here." The implication was unmistakable. His tone, his body language, everything dripped with unspoken judgment. Kendrick turned slightly toward him. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," he said calmly. "I booked this seat weeks ago, and I have a critical meeting in 3 hours. I need this time to prepare." Travis chuckled, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Sure you do. Let me guess. You're about to close a billion-dollar merger? Or is it just another startup trying to sell an app?" He scoffed. "Someone like you probably signs a $50,000 deal and thinks it's Wall Street history." Kendrick didn't respond. His silence held weight. But the cabin was no longer quiet. A few passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. One elderly man 2 rows back lowered his newspaper slightly. Others looked away. The flight supervisor cleared her throat. "Sir, I'm going to need you to comply. If you don't, we'll have to involve security. This is not about your reservation. It's about onboard protocol and passenger safety." Kendrick slowly pulled his phone from the armrest pocket. Let me be clear. You're asking me, the paying occupant of this seat, to move without just cause for someone who booked late because he claims to have a vague condition? And you've offered me no formal explanation, no documentation, no comparable accommodation. That's correct, the supervisor replied without blinking. We are asking for your cooperation. I'm not being uncooperative, Kendrick replied evenly. I'm simply refusing to accept arbitrary displacement. Sir, we're trying to avoid an escalation, she said, the tension in her voice starting to show. But if you insist on staying, I'll have to call airport security. Travis leaned against the seat back behind Kendrick, smirking. You don't want to do that, buddy. Trust me, it never ends well when someone like you tries to push it. That phrase, someone like you, landed heavier than anything else had. Kendrick looked up, locking eyes with the supervisor. I would like to speak with the captain. The captain is preparing for departure, she answered briskly. He has delegated this matter to us. At that moment, 2 airport security personnel stepped into the first-class cabin. Their presence alone turned heads. Their hands rested loosely near their belts. The room fell silent, thick with tension. Final chance, sir, the supervisor said. Will you move voluntarily? Kendrick's mind raced through the consequences. If he resisted, it would be spun as non-compliance. He'd be escorted off, possibly detained. The deal, his entire reputation, could be jeopardized. And they were counting on that. Counting on the humiliation to be enough to make him disappear. He drew a slow breath. I'll move, he said, his voice clear. Under formal protest. The supervisor nodded quickly, as if relieved. And I'll need all of your names, Kendrick added, and your employee IDs. For the record. Travis, already edging toward the vacated seat, sneered. Be grateful they're letting you stay on board at all. Kendrick rose from seat 2A, straightening his blazer with quiet dignity. As he stepped into the aisle, he noticed 3 passengers raising their phones, recording. He didn't look at the cameras. He didn't need to. He walked past Travis, past the supervisor, past the 2 security guards. No anger, no scene, just a man being displaced from where he rightfully belonged. And though the walk to economy felt like miles, Kendrick knew this wasn't the end of the fight. It was the beginning. Kendrick stepped out from seat 2A with deliberate calm, straightening the front of his black suit jacket as if this were just another business meeting. But his mind was racing. Every pair of eyes in the first-class cabin was now watching him, some with confusion, others with discomfort, and a few with quiet shame. A couple of passengers reached for their phones, pretending not to record. He felt every camera angle. The 2 security officers walked ahead of him, not touching him, but their presence alone made the moment feel more like an arrest than a seat reassignment. He passed Travis Brennan, who leaned back smugly in the reclaimed seat, and gave Kendrick a mocking smirk, satisfied with how things had turned out. As Kendrick moved down the aisle toward economy, he could hear low whispers trailing behind him. What did he do? Was he causing trouble? I've never seen them remove someone from first class before. Each question was a small cut, each assumption a weight pressing down. Kendrick had spent a lifetime proving he belonged in rooms people assumed he did not. Finally, the aisle narrowed and Kendrick reached row 34. The flight attendant pointed to the middle seat between a heavyset man in the aisle and a woman already pressed against the window. Excuse me, Kendrick said quietly, sliding into the narrow space. The man barely moved to let him pass, and once Kendrick was seated, the woman leaned even farther toward the window, trying to disappear from him. The space was cramped, his knees brushing the seat in front, elbows pinned tightly to his sides. The air was warmer back here, heavier. He reached up to adjust the overhead air vent, only to find it stuck. With effort, he loosened his tie slightly, careful not to show any sign of irritation. A different flight attendant passed by without looking at him. Kendrick pressed the call button, hoping for some water. 20 minutes passed. No one came. He pressed it again. They're usually slow back here, the man beside him muttered, not unkindly. Kendrick nodded but said nothing. He reached for his briefcase, awkwardly wedged under the seat, and pulled out his tablet. The Wi-Fi in economy was sluggish, too weak to load the updated charts he had prepared for the presentation. He tried again, failed again. He clenched his jaw, then relaxed it. This was all deliberate. Then came the final blow. A notification flashed across his phone. Luggage alert, rerouted to Minneapolis. His checked bag, the one with the backup copies of the investment contract, a fresh shirt, and printed documents for the meeting, had been diverted to another city. No explanation given. Kendrick inhaled slowly. His mother's voice echoed in his head. When they go low, you document everything. Without drawing attention, he opened a voice recorder app and began narrating. Flight NA415, North Aero, escorted to economy after confirmed first-class booking. Security involved. Luggage rerouted without consent. He kept his tone even, emotionless, logging every detail. He learned long ago that in America, justice often required receipts, clear, irrefutable documentation, especially for someone who looked like him. A soft chime behind him. He turned slightly. A young white man 2 rows back was holding his phone up, recording. Their eyes met. The man gave a small nod, subtle but full of quiet support. When the beverage cart finally arrived, Kendrick asked, "Could I have some water, please?" The attendant poured a plastic cup halfway and handed it to him without a word. Water sloshed onto his sleeve. No apology followed. Kendrick dabbed his cuff gently with a napkin. The man beside him frowned. "You just gave him a whole can of Coke," he said, nodding toward a passenger across the aisle. "Can't he get the rest of the water?" The attendant's smile thinned. "We'll see if there's more later," she said curtly, and moved on. Kendrick said nothing. He stared straight ahead, absorbing everything. The tension in his shoulders, the subtle humiliation, the unspoken messages in every action. They were trying to shrink him, to diminish him, but he wasn't shrinking. He was taking notes, and they had no idea what storm they had just ignited. By the time Kendrick had settled into the cramped middle seat of row 34, his discomfort had become secondary to something far more strategic: documentation. With the air thick and the overhead vent broken, he quietly tapped his phone screen, opening a secure notes app. Every interaction, every microaggression, every deviation from protocol, he was recording it all, voice memos interspersed with quiet type notations. He had learned long ago, indignity fades, but evidence speaks. What he did not know yet was that the first video had already gone viral. A young woman in row 11 had uploaded a 30-second clip titled, "Black Man Removed from First Class for Loud White Exec." Within minutes, it exploded across social platforms. The shaky footage showed Kendrick standing calmly, holding his briefcase, as a white man in a tailored suit squeezed into the seat he had vacated. No raised voices, no aggression, just quiet humiliation and smug replacement. The comments section lit up. "This is what systemic bias looks like. Why didn't anyone say anything? Disgusting." As the plane cruised toward Chicago, Kendrick's phone vibrated constantly, though the spotty in-flight signal delayed some alerts. Notifications from Pinnacle's executive team, mentions on social media, and text messages from acquaintances flooded in. One message stood out. It was from his assistant Amani. "Exec team confirmed for 2 p.m. CEO will greet you personally. Car en route. Also, check trending." He turned off airplane mode and opened his browser. Black CEO denied was trending globally. Millions had now seen his quiet removal from seat 2A. Dozens of passengers on the same flight had posted their own angles, some covert, others direct. In one clip, Travis Brennan's sneering comment, "People like you don't belong in first class," was caught crystal clear. Another showed security flanking Kendrick even as he offered no resistance. Across the cabin, a college student live-tweeted updates. "Passenger next to me says he booked 2 weeks ago. They moved him for some VIP, total BS." One reply read, "Who was that man?" Another said, "Whoever he is, he's the right one to stand up to this." A well-known business journalist reposted the original video, adding, "If this man is who I think he is, North Aero just made a billion-dollar mistake." Kendrick took a breath and turned inward. Not to retreat, but to recenter. He was not angry. Not yet. He was calculating. This was no longer about just one seat. It was now about power, perception, and control. By the time the plane began its descent, the hashtag had amassed over 3 million views. North Aero's PR team issued a rush statement. We are aware of an onboard incident and are reviewing passenger concerns. But it was far too late. Commentators were calling for accountability. Celebrities began reposting. One wrote, "This isn't customer service, it's racism." Hishrid, the CEO of a competing airline, chimed in subtly, retweeting the clip with a single sentence. "This wouldn't happen on our flights." The media caught that. Headlines emerged. Black CEO humiliated mid-flight by partner airline. Another read, $500 million deal in jeopardy after first-class debacle. Kendrick's executive team, now fully aware, convened a secure call. Aisha Robinson, Pinnacle's COO, spoke first. "Do we proceed with the transfer?" Kendrick didn't hesitate. "Hold the $50 million. Freeze it. The meeting still happens, but on new terms." There was silence, then a shared sense of gravity. The momentum had shifted. This wasn't just a viral clip anymore. This was now a matter of corporate reputation, investor integrity, and social responsibility. Kendrick had spent years building Pinnacle to be more than a fund. It was a force for recalibrating power in industries long ruled by unchecked privilege. And this incident, it had handed him something rare in corporate warfare, a moral high ground, backed by millions of witnesses. In that moment, he wasn't just a CEO heading to close a $500 million deal. He was something more dangerous to institutions that thrived on silence. He was a black man with receipts, resolve, and reach. And North Aero had no idea what was about to hit them. The sharp buzz of his phone jolted Kendrick from his thoughts. The plane had landed. Passengers were now crowding the aisle, stretching limbs and reaching for overhead bins. Kendrick remained seated, not from exhaustion, but calculation. He had no desire to brush shoulders with those who had silently watched his humiliation unfold. This moment was his to control. Once the cabin cleared, Kendrick stepped out, posture tall, expression unreadable. At baggage claim, he was greeted not by a company car, but by a private black SUV, one his assistant had ordered to ensure discretion. As the vehicle pulled away from the airport, Kendrick scanned his tablet. The social media storm had grown into a digital wildfire. Commentators, influencers, business leaders, all weighing in. One headline read, "Investor humiliated on partner airline hours before $500 million meeting." Another asked, "Will Kendrick Monroe pull the deal?" When the SUV reached the towering glass building of North Aero's headquarters, Kendrick took a moment before stepping out. 38 floors of aviation legacy loomed above him, but he had no time for reverence. He straightened his suit and walked forward. At the main entrance, 2 uniformed guards intercepted him. "Good morning," Kendrick greeted them, polite but firm. "I have a 2 o'clock with your executive board." The taller of the 2 guards gave a skeptical once-over. "Name?" "Kendrick Monroe, CEO of Vantage Equity." The second guard frowned at the tablet in his hand. "We were told to expect someone from Vantage, yes, but not—" His voice trailed off, unfinished but unmistakably implying something else. "I can provide identification," Kendrick replied calmly, retrieving both his driver's license and business card. The guards took their time examining both. "Wait here," one said, stepping inside to make a call. Kendrick stood silently in the polished marble lobby. He noticed several North Aero staff pass by, giving him the quick once-over that professionals give when they do not expect to see someone like him in such a place. His phone buzzed again. Another news outlet had picked up the story. He muted the alert. Finally, a young woman from reception approached. "Sir, I apologize for the confusion. There's been some misunderstanding regarding your appointment," Kendrick replied evenly. "Tell Stephen Lang that Kendrick Monroe is in the lobby, waiting for the meeting he confirmed last week." "I'll check," she said, retreating to her desk. More minutes passed. Other visitors arrived and were welcomed immediately. Kendrick remained. His presence, his patience, became a quiet protest in itself. Until finally, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Stephen Lang, CEO of North Aero, stepped out. Silver-haired in a navy suit, his expression shifted rapidly from confusion to disbelief to alarm. "Mr. Monroe," he said, hurrying forward, "please forgive the delay. I was just informed." "I'm here for our meeting," Kendrick replied, offering a firm handshake. "Shall we?" Behind Lang, 2 board members followed, whispering urgently. Lang cleared his throat. "This way, sir." They rode the elevator in silence. Kendrick felt their glances. He said nothing. On the 38th floor, the executive conference room gleamed with glass and brushed steel. As Kendrick entered, he met the gazes of over a dozen people, some cautious, some curious, one or two clearly already aware of the viral storm. "Welcome, Mr. Monroe," Lang began. "We're grateful for your time. Before we begin our strategic review, I want to personally assure you we'll address the flight situation after the meeting," Kendrick interjected coolly. "Let's handle the numbers first." The room fell silent for a beat, then Lang nodded. "Very well." As presentations began, Kendrick took his seat at the table, unshaken. The humiliation he endured earlier was real, but it would not define the tone of this negotiation. Not yet. But his silence did not mean surrender. It was the calm before the storm, and they had no idea what was coming next. The air inside the executive conference room carried a polished chill. Gleaming floors, panoramic windows, silver carafes of coffee lined up like soldiers. Kendrick sat composed at the long table, with a leather portfolio open in front of him. Around him, the executive team of North Aero was midway through its presentation. Financials, projections, and carefully rehearsed optimism about the partnership. Stephen Lang led the meeting with corporate polish. "With Vantage as capital," he said, "we can complete the modernization of our long-haul fleet within 18 months. Routes to Asia and South America will see a 20% increase in efficiency." Kendrick nodded occasionally, asked precise questions, and made detailed notes. No one dared bring up the elephant in the room, at least not yet. When the financial deck concluded, Stephen smiled. "So, Mr. Monroe, shall we proceed to finalize the transfer of the initial $50 million? Kendrick closed his folder slowly and looked around the room. "I think before we move any money," he said calmly, "you should know who I am beyond the balance sheets." There was a beat of silence. Some executives shifted in their seats. "This morning I boarded flight NA415 from New York to Chicago. I had booked seat 2A in first class 3 weeks ago. I was removed from that seat, not due to overbooking, not due to any misconduct, but because someone in your organization deemed a white platinum member more worthy of it than me." Gasps, whispered exchanges. A few heads snapped up in recognition. "I was escorted to the back of the plane," Kendrick continued, "placed in economy between two passengers who didn't want me there. My luggage was rerouted, my boarding pass ignored, and from the behavior of your crew it was clear this was not an accident." Stephen Lang's face paled. "Mr. Monroe, I was not aware." "But someone was," Kendrick cut in, "and I believe that someone sits in this room." The atmosphere shifted. Gone was the polished confidence. Now came tension, uncertainty, fear. "I have footage," Kendrick said, tapping his tablet. "Recordings, passenger witness statements, internal chatter that was overheard. I even have voice memos your flight attendants were careless enough to speak near." He glanced at Carter Langford, the chief experience officer seated 2 seats away. Carter avoided his gaze. "What happened to me is not just unacceptable," Kendrick said, his voice firm but measured. "It is systemic. And if it happened to me, on the day I was arriving to invest $500 million, then I must ask, how many others with less visibility face the same or worse?" Silence. Kendrick stood slowly, placed his tablet on the table. "I am not pulling out, not yet, but effective immediately, the transfer of the first $50 million is frozen. It will not move until 3 conditions are met." He raised one finger. "First, a formal investigation into this incident, conducted by an independent firm. A second, the immediate suspension of any staff directly involved pending said investigation. A third, a written commitment from North Aero to review and revise its passenger experience protocols, with particular focus on bias and equity." The room was frozen. Stephen Lang swallowed. "That's reasonable. We'll begin immediately." "I'm not finished," Kendrick added. He walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, then turned. "This incident has exposed a deeper rot, not just within your company, but across the industry. That's why I'm forming the Equity Navigation Alliance. It will be an independent body to support whistleblowers, enforce accountability, and push for systemic reform across aviation." He held their gaze. You may join us as founding partners if your actions over the coming weeks align with that mission, but I will not be joining your board. I will remain external, watching. And with that, he collected his folder. My team will send the revised investment terms by tomorrow morning. Until then, I suggest you begin cleaning house. No one spoke as he exited. The door closed with a soft click, but its echo shook the entire room. Kendrick returned to his hotel suite as dusk settled over the city skyline. The conference room confrontation had been decisive, but the real work was just beginning. He poured a glass of still water, sat down at his desk, and opened his laptop. A spreadsheet glowed on the screen. Columns of names, dates, and complaints. These were not just numbers, they were people, stories, echoes of discrimination and silence. Aisha Robinson, his chief operating officer, joined the encrypted call first. "You sure you want to go public with all this?" she asked. Kendrick nodded. "We can't just freeze their money and walk away. We need a framework, not just for them, but for every airline that's been operating unchecked for years." James Chen, general counsel, chimed in. "You're talking industry-wide oversight. That's not small." "I know," Kendrick said, "which is why it has to start now." He pulled up a working draft. Equity Navigation Alliance, a nonprofit initiative to support whistleblowers, provide legal resources, and publish public equity audits on major airline and transportation companies. "The model is simple," Kendrick explained. "Think of it as a watchdog with teeth. We won't be part of any company's leadership. We'll remain fully independent. But any company that wants our stamp of accountability will need to undergo real transparency." Aisha's eyes lit up. "You're flipping the script, using the investor role to become the regulator." "Exactly," Kendrick replied. "They already fear losing capital. Now let them fear losing credibility." Over the next few hours, Kendrick's team worked tirelessly. A roadmap formed, a three-phase reform strategy. Phase 1, require North Aero to conduct a full audit of customer complaints, hiring records, promotion patterns, and onboard incident reports, specifically categorized by race, gender, and socioeconomic background. Phase 2, mandate third-party anti-bias and accountability training for all cabin crew, supervisors, and customer service agents, tracked and measured with quarterly reports. Phase 3, create a permanent oversight mechanism within the company, one that includes whistleblower protections and direct communication with Equity Navigation Alliance. "This is more than PR," James noted. "If they agree to this, it'll set a new bar for corporate accountability." Kendrick stared at the document. "They won't agree unless we make it too costly not to." He opened another tab. The trending hashtag Chowchuri Black CEO denied had passed 15 million mentions. Public opinion was heavily in his favor. Several national civil rights organizations had begun issuing statements. Former employees of North Aero were coming forward anonymously. At 10:30 p.m., Kendrick drafted his formal conditions. The tone was direct but professional, not angry and clear. He wrote, "North Aero has a choice: lead with integrity or fall with denial. The $50 million investment remains frozen until the following are completed." The list followed, itemized with deadlines and expectations. He finished with a note on the Equity Navigation Alliance, its mission, funding, and how North Aero could be the first airline to join as a founding partner. He paused for a moment before sending it, then hit send. By morning, the proposal had reached every senior executive at North Aero. Journalists caught wind. Rumors swirled. Industry analysts called the strategy radical, visionary, and dangerous for those with something to hide. But Kendrick wasn't looking for applause. He was setting a precedent. The next day, while walking through Millennium Park with his security detail, he was approached by a young black flight attendant who worked for a competing airline. "Thank you," she said quietly. "We all saw what they did to you. We've all felt it. But you did something about it." Kendrick nodded, humbled. "I'm doing what I wish someone had done for me 20 years ago." And in that moment, he knew. This wasn't just a business play. It was a blueprint for justice. By mid-morning, North Aero's corporate office had become a hive of activity. Phone lines buzzed. Legal teams scrambled. Crisis PR consultants huddled in glass-walled offices. The email from Kendrick Monroe had ignited an internal firestorm. His demands were specific, measurable, public. And the timing, strategically chosen to land right before North Arrow's quarterly board meeting, was no accident. Stephen Lang, the company's CEO, paced behind his desk, reading the proposal for the fourth time. Across the table sat Carter Langford, the chief experience officer whose whispered instructions had initiated the seat reassignment. "This isn't just about money anymore," Lang muttered. "He's coming after our entire structure." "He's bluffing," Carter insisted, arms crossed. "No way he walks away from $500 million on principal." Lang didn't respond. He was watching the stock ticker on the corner of his monitor, down 6% since the story broke and still dropping. Outside the boardroom, news vans were already parking across the street. North Arrow's name was trending across every major platform. The hashtag Chernier Black CEO denied was now joined by a new one. Equity Alliance now. Public opinion had turned fast. Some passengers had even begun canceling flights. By noon, North Arrow issued an official public statement. It read, "We at North Arrow are deeply committed to fairness, respect, and the safety of all our passengers. While we regret the unfortunate events on flight NA415, we are investigating fully and will take all necessary actions to ensure such incidents do not recur." The statement was generic, hollow. The comments beneath it exploded with outrage. "Generic apology number 37, one user wrote. "Say his name, Kendrick Monroe," another demanded. "Investigate what? It's on video," a third added. Kendrick's team remained silent. No follow-up, no media interviews, just the pressure of the ticking clock. Back inside North Arrow HQ, Lang convened an emergency executive meeting. The room was tense. "This is going to require more than a press release," said Monica Reed, the company's head of human resources. "We need action, real action." Carter scoffed. "You're saying we should bow to his demands?" "I'm saying we should face the reality," Monica replied. "This isn't about Kendrick. It's about what people think we stand for." A junior VP cautiously raised a hand. "What if we agree to most of it, but not all? Will he settle?" "No," Lang said flatly. "He sent us a deadline, not a negotiation." Silence. Then Carter offered an alternative. "Let me go public. I'll do an interview. I'll control the narrative. Say it was a misunderstanding, that Kendrick misinterpreted what happened." Lang's stare was cold. "No, you've already done enough." That afternoon, the board of directors met privately. Several members were furious, not just about the incident, but about how blindsided they had been. One director slammed the proposal on the table. "How did we not know this was the man behind the deal? He had a seat in 2A. We threw him into 34B. Another added, "If we lose him, we lose half the partnerships depending on that investment." Stephen Lang took a deep breath. "He's giving us one chance to get this right." By sunset, North Arrow released a second statement. This one was different. It acknowledged Kendrick Monroe by name. It acknowledged the seat reassignment, and it acknowledged that changes were necessary. Additionally, North Arrow announced the suspension of multiple staff pending investigation, the hiring of an external equity audit firm, and a willingness to meet Kendrick's outlined terms for partnership, including a founding seat on the Oversight Alliance board. Social media reacted instantly. Some praised the pivot, others called it damage control. But one comment stood out. "When someone shows you what power with integrity looks like, you follow." That evening, Kendrick sat by the hotel window, watching planes land and take off in the distance. The notification came in. North Arrow issues new statement. Accepts 7 of 8 conditions. Requests clarification on final item. He smiled slightly. They had blinked, but he wasn't done. The next morning, as headlines blasted, "North Arrow accepts CEO's demands," a different storm was brewing behind closed doors. Inside North Arrow's 30th floor executive wing, Carter Langford was anything but silent. He slammed a folder on the conference table. "This is insanity. We're surrendering to a man who ambushed us with a PR stunt." Around the room, executives avoided his eyes. Some shifted uncomfortably. A few silently agreed, but no one spoke. Stephen Lang, the CEO, entered, calm but firm. We're not surrendering, we're correcting. Carter wasn't done. We're letting him dictate our policy, restructuring our teams, handing him a seat on oversight. We're rewarding theatrics. No, Lang replied. We're responding to truth, and we're preserving what's left of our reputation. But Carter had already shifted to another plan, one built in the shadows. That afternoon, a financial blog posted a curious article suggesting Kendrick's fund was over-leveraged and had a hidden liquidity problem. Hours later, a second piece appeared, citing anonymous insiders claiming Kendrick used racial outrage to pressure his partners. Though subtly worded, the implications were clear. Kendrick Monroe was unstable, opportunistic, and not to be trusted. The smear campaign had begun. Kendrick's team saw it immediately. Aisha Robinson, his COO, forwarded the pieces to the group thread. Carter's fingerprints all over this. Within minutes, Kendrick's digital forensics team traced the source, a PR firm recently contracted by North Arrow on Langford's authority. They were prepared. By evening, Kendrick released a carefully worded personal message across his social channels. When truth threatens power, the first counterattack is usually character assassination. I stand by my record. Let the facts speak for themselves. The message went viral, and Kendrick wasn't done. The next morning, he published selected internal emails, obtained legally via whistleblowers, showing Langford directing the flight crew to remove the man in 2A discreetly if needed. It was the final crack in the dam. By midday, Monica Reed, head of HR, walked into the boardroom with a signed affidavit from a second whistleblower. It detailed multiple instances of Carter Langford manipulating seating protocols based on appearance, assumptions, and executive preferences. The board had seen enough. Langford was summoned. For the first time in weeks, he looked nervous. "We have two paths," said board chairwoman Linda Ramos. "You resign now, or we vote to terminate you for cause." Carter tried to pivot, blamed others, questioned the whistleblowers, but the room had shifted. The politics, the pressure, the public eye, it all aligned against him. He walked out without saying a word. North Arrow issued an immediate press release. Effective today, Carter Langford has stepped down from his role as Chief Experience Officer. We thank him for his service and reaffirm our commitment to structural equity and transparency. Stock rebounded nearly 4% within hours. Kendrick, meanwhile, remained silent, strategically. He knew the fight was bigger than Carter. That night, at his hotel suite, he convened a video call with leaders from 3 other logistics and aviation firms in his portfolio. They agreed to co-found the Equity Navigation Alliance with him, an independent oversight organization across the transportation sector. Kendrick would not serve inside North Arrow. He would serve above it, alongside others demanding accountability across the board. 3 weeks after the boardroom shakeup and Langford's removal, Kendrick Monroe walked through Terminal 4 of Dallas International with a quiet sense of resolve. This time, he was not boarding a flight in secret. There were no hidden cameras or hushed whispers. He was traveling for something else entirely. At Gate A27, a sleek new banner stood proudly, Equity Navigation Alliance. Launch event today. Kendrick paused. The words felt heavier than they looked. In that phrase was embedded every humiliation, every injustice, and every step forward that had brought him here. North Arrow had followed through, at least in part. Following Carter Langford's dismissal, the airline implemented a wide-ranging internal review. Several department heads were quietly replaced. An anonymous reporting system was activated. Anti-bias training became mandatory for every employee, including the board. More notably, they had agreed to Kendrick's terms. They would become founding members, alongside 3 other national carriers and 2 logistics firms, in the new industry-wide oversight body, the Equity Navigation Alliance. Kendrick had declined North Arrow's offer of a board seat or ceremonial role. He did not want to become part of the airline. He wanted to remain outside, independent, watching, shaping, and holding accountable. And now, on this brisk Monday morning, the world was about to see what that accountability looked like. In the airport's main conference hall, representatives from across the aviation and transport industries filled the rows. Journalists, civic leaders, and regulators joined them. The press called it the most significant anti-discrimination initiative since the Transportation Equity Act of 1986. Kendrick stood at the podium, flanked by leaders from the founding member companies. He wore the same understated black suit, white shirt, and muted tie, but this time, his posture held a different kind of power. 3 weeks ago, he began, I was told without cause that I didn't belong in seat 2A. What I've learned since is that I wasn't alone. Many of you in this room have heard those same words in one form or another. You don't belong here. He let the silence linger. We're here to make sure that sentence gets erased from this industry's vocabulary. The crowd applauded, not with polite formality, but with the steady rhythm of shared conviction. Over the next 45 minutes, Kendrick outlined the Equity Navigation Alliance's scope: independent investigations of discrimination complaints, annual equity audits of participating companies, public reporting and accountability dashboards, whistleblower protection funding, a leadership incubator for underrepresented voices in aviation and logistics. And finally, the biggest announcement: Pinnacle Capital would seed the initiative with $12 million from Kendrick's own personal wealth. No strings attached. This isn't charity, Kendrick said calmly. This is investment. Investment in fairness, in visibility, in a system that works for everyone. Turn. By the end of the conference, 3 more major companies had signed on. Kendrick's firm was flooded with press requests, investment interest, and calls from allies across industries. But he kept the celebration minimal. There was still work to do. That evening, as he boarded his flight home, the gate agent greeted him with warmth. Welcome aboard, Mr. Monroe. We're honored to have you. Kendrick offered a quiet smile, not out of pride, but out of awareness of how far things had come and how far they still needed to go. In his seat, he pulled out his tablet, not to check emails or market figures, but to review applications for the Alliance's first leadership program. Among the applicants were young black engineers, second-generation immigrants, veterans, and more. They weren't just applying to work in the industry, they were ready to shape it. As the plane ascended into the night sky, Kendrick looked out the window. Seat 2A was his again, but this time, it wasn't just his to claim, it was his to protect. For everyone who had ever been told, you don't belong here. Have you ever felt out of place simply because of who you are or how others see you? What would you have done if you were in Kendrick's seat? Let us know where you're watching from and what you believe real justice should look like.